I had to get to the point where it was like, I know these numbers, I have all this information.
It's the most important thing to happen in sports.
The majority of coaches don't have the two things that you need: playing experience and analytical expertise. Welcome back to Chalk Talk. Today, the good question: is there too much data in baseball? Is it ruining the game? All these nerds in the front office,
damn nerds that bunts. Kev. Fuck you, Kev.
Now, I'm a nerd. I enjoy data, so I guess the question that we have for the group today is like, what is the role of data in baseball, and is too much data ruining the game? And I mean, there's so many different. We've got a great group to talk about this. There's so many different ways to do it. How do you use data, Eric? What's your role of data?
I mean, data is basically like anything that can be useful to help you, in my opinion. So like for me, even if you get data, right, like you don't have to use that. So to me, it's all really up to you. Like, so I don't think it really matters. Is there too much or too less? I don't think so, because you find what works for you. Like, so for me, like, I mean, I don't really get in depth of, so what you do, like Intertronic and stuff like that. I don't really care, like, so for me, like, if I get like decent amount of spin rate, like get some Repsoda numbers, and then honestly, I just gotta throw 97. Like that's what it is. Like, so some numbers really mean a lot to me. Like velo does mean a lot to me because I faced that and all that. But like some of the other stuff doesn't really matter that much to me. So I'm gonna use like what benefits me the most, and I don't really care about some of the other stuff. So
yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for that, and being your own coach and understanding your own process, what works for you, what doesn't. Because some guys can process a lot of data, and some guys don't need any. Like some of the best hitters ever wanted no data, right?
Right.
Just show up, I'm going to hit. But they have this intuition about the game. Some guys are like, I need all the data. I want to know what this guy's going to throw, all this different stuff. Right. For me, there's a line to draw, and it's the white lines of the field. Like, use all the data you can in practice, in the off season. Tim, you can speak to this too, I'm sure. Like, use the data to maximize your training to get as much better as you possibly can with every single day, every single rep, whatever. Like, maximize that. As soon as you step onto the field, the white lines, like, you got to turn that stuff off. And I think that's where people are really poor with it. A lot of players get caught where they're like, oh, I'm thinking about my delivery, and I saw my grip was this, my spin rate 20 miles or 20 RPM down on that one or whatever. No, it's time to compete. When you step out there, like, whatever you have that day, you're going to have it, and like just go win with it. And then when you cross the white lines coming off the field, okay, now let's analyze. That's how I kind of separate it. But what's your opinion on that?
To me, data has evolved sports in a great way. It's the application of data that has hindered a lot of great things about sport. So to your point, if you're taking a data approach into a game, and that's what you're thinking about is the data versus the performance, that's where we've lost on the analytics side and the data side. So we in CTTP and all the athletes that work out here, we have a crap ton of data that we take on the guys. Do they know that we take the data? Absolutely, we know it, but they don't necessarily see it until I present it to them. And it's the presentation to them that matters most. So if Tosh is sitting here trying to work on his, let's just say back squat, I will pull data to him to show him here's what we need to be working on as far as our periodization and protocol. But my presentation to him is what matters most. So then in the end, him as the athlete, he can focus on purely the training and the execution of everything we're trying to get done.
And that's the biggest thing for me is there's three main things when it comes to data that actually provide success. It's generally communication, consumption, and effect. So the ability to communicate the data and actually explain it to somebody so that they can consume it in a way that they can use that and be effective on field. And that's where a lot of people, when they hear all this kind of this new evolution in the game, or all of this different availability of different technologies and all this stuff, there's a bell curve going on where it's the hot thing to do right now. So everyone is in there, and it's just a flooded market, and it's a lot of different data points, and nobody really knows exactly what the most effective means are. And we're going to get to the point once we flush through all this other stuff that you're at 5 to 10 certain metrics, 5 to 10 different technologies that actually matter, and we'll know that. And so when it comes to that, the people who are going to have the most success are the ones who can take that information and communicate it to the athletes in the way that the athletes can truly think about it for themselves, understand the value of it, and then go put it on the field and be effective. And that's it's the most important thing to happen in sports, I think, in the last 50 to 100 years, because it allowed a lot of athletes who, they understood their body in a way that others couldn't, and they could communicate their value in a way that a coach couldn't deny. I can compete against a coach who has 30 years in like Major League Baseball by explaining this data supports this, where anecdotally 20 years ago he could just trump everything, be like, well, this is what we know, and I couldn't actually communicate that. So I think that's the key, and I think it's the most important thing going on. But with everything, the marriage that will come between like anecdote from like say old school guys and then the data to support whether or not they're right or wrong, it's the marriage between those two that's going to push the game forward, and that's where we're heading. We're just kind of in this weird pushback.
We have this like tug of war going on between the people that want no data involved, just go out there and grind it out and play, and the people that want to make database decisions. Now, what's your filtering process, Lucas? Like,
Yeah, so for me, like going back to what you said, I struggled with it for a few years in the minor leagues, right? Because it was kind of when the data was really coming along, and you're starting to get Rapsodo numbers, you're starting to get TrackMan numbers. You know, I'm getting numbers on my force plate and all that stuff, and I kind of got paralysis by analysis for a while because I was kind of sitting there. You know, I'd be out on the mound, like you said, and I'm sitting there thinking about, oh, you know, I don't think my spin's great today. What am I doing wrong? And, you know, you can say don't do that, and I knew not to do that, but it took me a while to say, okay, I have to separate. In the lab, I want to know these numbers. These numbers are what make me who I am. If I have good numbers, I can be confident in my numbers, and I know I'm right where I need to be. But then separating that to once I get in the game, I had to get to the point where I was like, I know these numbers. I have all this information. I have to be confident in that information, and that's going to help me on the field. Because for me, knowing that, you know, I'm a high spin guy, let's say, or that I have a lot of vertical break and I can throw fastballs in certain spots in certain situations and kind of get away with it, that for me gave me confidence. Now, is it exactly true? No, nothing's foolproof, but it gives me confidence out there, even if I'm in a 2-0 count or, you know, in a bad situation, bases loaded, I'm like, oh, I know my stuff's good enough to get this guy. And that's where, you know, there's such thing as not enough information and there's such thing as too much. And it's kind of, you know, figuring out, like Eric said, what's right for you. And for me, it was just finding the things that give me confidence and finding the things that I can make kind of my backbone. That's who I am, that's what I do, and that's what's going to make me successful.
Yeah, I think it's all about balance, really. At the end of the day, everything's balanced, right? So if you can balance it, if you just go one way and just die, you're just not going to be successful. So if you throw, let's say you throw 95 with a 2,700 spin rate, so you've got an elite level fastball, right? You give up a fucking 10 spot every time. Your ERA is 10. You're walking 40 guys in 20 innings. Then what the fuck? Are you just gonna leave or die with it? Then you might get another shot just because you throw decently hard. And nowadays, 95 won't even get your job. To be honest, you got to throw like 100. You know, like, but you're not gonna be successful because you're not really competing on the mound. You're fucking doming yourself up, and we've all been domed up before. I mean, I've been domed up before when I first converted to pitching. It's a tough sport to play. Now, it's tough without even thinking about your analytics. How are you going to go and compete, like you said, get on the mound and think about your spin rate? Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, I think the best scenario you could possibly be in is an athlete that knows nothing except to listen to the coach.
Absolutely.
And a coach that knows everything
Yes.
and can tell the athlete exactly what to do in making database decisions. Now, we're so far away from that reality because the majority of coaches don't have the two things that you need to be able to do that: playing experience and analytical expertise. You get one or the other.
Right.
You get the coach that knows the analytics but has no idea what it's like to step on the mound.
Exactly.
Or you get the coach that played for 20 years and had a great career but doesn't know the analytics. I think where we're going, to your point about like getting the technologies down and the metrics that matter, in 10 to 15 years, some of these guys that played in the big leagues, had a cup of coffee, whatever, but then learned the analytics along the way, or they use the analytics to get themselves further in their career, they're going to become coaches. So you're going to have a lot more coaches that have both of those things and a lot more ability for the players to just trust the coaches and still get the benefit of the analytics, but we're just not there right now, and I think that's where the tug-of-war comes from.
And I think we're going to take a very long time to get there, and so that's where I don't know if that's the most ideal in a vacuum situation, and I don't think we'll ever get there.
No, and I think the workaround is the player has to know
Exactly.
both
Yep.
and know how to flip the switch between the two of them. When is it training time and analytics time, and when is it competition and game time?
And I think that's why when you brought up being a self-coach is such a huge thing nowadays, because if you don't understand yourself, then you're fucked. Or just be a fucking dumbass and have an awesome dude that you just follow. I'm serious.
And hope you stay with it.
Some of the best players I've played with, like that are in the bigs right now, they're not the smartest dudes. Yeah. They're just freaks, and they just listen, and they'll do it, you know. But they don't overthink it because when they go, they're like, dude, That's
But
easy
that's
game.
the
I've done
outliers.
this.
And so that's the biggest thing where we're trying to, you'll always have your outliers on both sides of the spectrum.
right.
And so what we're trying to do is from the middle out, how do we solve that, like the mass problem? And so that's where empowering the athletes and educating the athletes to the point that they at least know enough to make some decisions and put it into effect. And then switching the coach's role in their minds where they're not just the be all, tell all, this is what I know and this is what you're going to listen to. It's more of a collaboration with the athlete, figuring out exactly how they're going to be the most effective on the field with the information they have. And so I think that's probably where the ultimate ideal kind of situation will come from, is that the coaches will get a little less, I don't want to say dictator, kind of like this is exactly what you're doing because I know best. And the player will get a little bit more ownership and autonomous to that situation so they can work together.
I'm interested in your perspective on that, Tim, because you're, I mean, more so than any of us, you're on the coaching side, coming to it from that perspective. You use a lot of data. You also handle guys in season and communicate with them what they need and stuff like that on the training side, recovery side, analytics side, in-game stuff. You handle all that stuff. So as a coach, like, what do you find, how do you go about delivering that data to the player?
First and foremost, I have to establish a relationship with the player. You know, I have to understand who the player is, how they take in information, what is their current system. Because in the end, I can learn more from listening than I can actually trying to empower what I know and what I think is best. And then in the end, it's gonna what's gonna happen is we're gonna have a good like system and congruency that's gonna basically just evolve that guy's performance going forward. You know, so I think. That's probably one of the biggest issues within analytics is we just try to force players to fit the analytic role versus letting the athlete groom what they see as best and most beneficial. Because I've had conversations where, one hitter, for instance, I asked him, I was like, hey, so what do you want to know about this pitcher? He's like, absolutely nothing. I was like, okay, that's fine. And, we'll leave it at that. And then I'll go over and I'll talk to someone else, a pitcher, and they'll want to know everything. We created analytics purely for one pitcher this last season that he wanted to see. And so, with that being said, that's the testimony to the power of analytics is if you have the broad spectrum analytics, you can then refine it into exactly what that player wants and how they're going to use it and watch them basically take that analytic, put it on the field, and they're going to thrive in that.
That's a great point. If a player has a question, hey, can I know more about this? Yeah, we got that. Here you go. Here's the information. But if a player doesn't, then you don't have to deliver anything to them. And how can that be a bad thing? Yeah. How can that be a bad thing?
The way it should be used is that it's another tool in the toolbox, and that's it. It's not going to change anything outside of if you can learn how to use a hammer better or teach someone how to use a hammer.
And when.
It's going to be advantageous to you. And if you don't find value in it, okay. But that's kind
Like
of
the same information could be good for this dude. Like he could really benefit from it.
Yep.
And this motherfucker will literally crumble because he did not need that because he just overworked, he's domed up or whatever. So that's why Tim bringing up the establishing the relationship with the player is so important. And that's a coach's role, right? So to find out, that's what makes you a good coach and a bad coach. Bad coaches don't give a fuck about that.
Yep.
Good coaches will actually learn from the players and kind of develop that, and so that you know which information this player will benefit from the most. So. Tim, you still suck, but I mean.
I know.
Well, on that note, I guess none of this is relevant.
You're just upset that Lucas beat you today in the
Shut
lift
up, dude. I
off.
don't want to talk about it.
data
Body
says
by
that
Tim,
you
Leave it,
body
like,
by
subscribe,
Aaron.
and don't forget, lift big, throw gas, hit bomb.
just not
Lift like
as big.
Lucas.
Yeah, lift
like Lucas. We need to get shirts. Lift like Lucas.
That was going to be my question was, I wanted to use data analysis with Tim, but then from experience and actually lifting heavy, I was going to go to Lucas because he actually lifts heavy.
Fuck out of here.
You suck, Eric.
Fuck you.
Poor Eric.
Is that it for Chalk Talk?
Yep.